Emergency management has never been funded, staffed, or resourced appropriately ever. I think about people that talk about what their needs are, and we are always understaffed and we are underfunded. And so now we have a tool that is in our toolbox, but we have to practically leverage it overall. Now let's talk about hesitancy for a second. I hear it. I hear that people are worried about it. I hear that AI is going to take our jobs. And I still go back to what I heard a couple of years ago as AI was coming out into the field, which is humans are still the levers behind it. We can either wrap our arms around technology or technology is going to run circles around us. And I share that experience because where we are today is that it's here. It's not going anywhere. If everybody's saying AI first, we should be adopting that. We should be thinking about how AI is a forethought in emergency management.
All right, welcome everybody to the Crisis Lab podcast. I'm Kyle, I'll be your host. And so today we're going to have another one of our conversations, and today it's going to be with Tom Sivak, who is currently the Chief Emergency Manager at Emergency Management One. And so Tom, thanks for joining us. As always, it's good to have a conversation with other professionals in the field. And your career has been full spectrum of what I would call like U.S. emergency management. You've gone from municipal operations to federal, regional leadership, and most recently serving as FEMA Region 5 Administrator, leading disaster operations across 6 states and a number of tribal nations, responding more than 15 presidentially declared disasters, including a number of ones that we've seen in the headlines. But your operational foundation was really built in the field. As a Deputy Director of Operations for Cook County, you managed preparedness and operational coordination across 135 municipalities, and you spent a number of years in the field. And most recently, you have transitioned, and I don't think you've retired. So I think you've transitioned, and you're now with Emergency Management One, leading the effort in terms of integration of technical platforms and even AI into the emergency management space. So Tom, welcome to the Crisis Lab podcast. I think I covered the foundations here, but I'd love to hear what you're working on these days and what's keeping you busy.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Kyle, thanks for having me today. It's really exciting to be able to just do some shop talk, especially as it relates to emergency management, crisis management, consequence management, whatever we call it today overall. What's interesting is that as I transitioned from FEMA, and I love how you said you haven't retired yet, I got a little bit more of a longer runway for that. But what's exciting is that we're finally seeing some technological advances that are actually going to be supportive of the emergency management community overall. When I was with FEMA, like if I go back to my time at FEMA Region 5, that was when ChatGPT was starting. You know, you start looking at these AI tools, and I remember our chief of staff was really getting into it. His output was amazing. What we were finding is that he was doing a lot of stuff personally as it related to AI and maximizing our ability for all of our programs. So it was this new thing. And I remember one day I was talking to colleagues. I was over at the city of Chicago, hanging out with colleagues that I worked with when I was at the city. And they were like, gosh, yeah, I'm working on this exercise and I don't really know what to do. And I go, watch this. So I pulled out my phone and I had the app on my phone and I said, write me an exercise for a large metropolitan area and make it a hazmat incident. And their eyes wide open. So when I met the two co-founders, Tyler and Gunnar with M1, I was really intrigued. This was about 15 to 20 hours before my tenure with FEMA was over. And it was what's next. What's been interesting is I've been watching the AI field explode, especially in emergency management. It's a buzzword. Everybody's using it. You know, you walk into the airport, you see something about AI, and any conferences, there's going to be at least one, if not two, if not three entities there. Over the last, basically since January, I've had an opportunity to see things in a different set of lenses. As when I was as a 20-year career emergency manager, I knew the Midwest. We flood a lot. We have severe incidents. We have risk. I knew the Midwest very well. But what I didn't really know, and I didn't have many experiences, at least I had some experiences during my FEMA tenure, but I was really starting to understand the true challenges that emergency managers face across the U.S. When I look at the technological advances that are happening, and I've talked to leaders in the field who've said, finally, we have a solution that's actually going to support the emergency management community. We get to hear the stories from these emergency managers who are saying, look, I'm underfunded, understaffed, and under-resourced. I don't have a large budget. I've been asking for staff for years. I'm being told I have to cut my budget by 10%, but I'm still expected to do the output of 2, 3, 4, 5 different people overall. As I've continued to spread the wings in AI and emergency management, I'm seeing that we have an opportunity here that's different. But I also believe that we have to have some foundations for how people are going to leverage it over time. If I look internationally as well, everybody's using something to maximize their output overall. And I actually personally believe AI is actually going to help us actually, we focus on mental health as emergency managers. We don't focus on ourselves. And I believe that what we're seeing is AI is starting to get some of that time in a day back so we can spend time with our family and friends and have a little bit more of a home life outside of our 12, 14, 16, 18-hour days. So with EM1, I say that from technology standpoint, we're there. We're seeing it. Everybody's talking about it. But our opportunity now is to actually get AI operationalized in the field. As we're operationalizing AI, one of the things that we can be focusing on are foundations, coming up with that, using our planning processes, setting foundations, doing your assessment to say where it works, where can AI benefit you on a blue sky and a gray sky day. And then also having an implementation period of how it's actually going to be leveraged on a regular basis. If we use AI every day, it's a forethought, not an afterthought. If we don't use AI and we're only using it in an incident, that's going to be the afterthought component. That's where I'm seeing the value of the intersection of AI into the emergency management field.
So there's a lot of discussion about this, of course. We see similar discussions in the international space in terms of international crisis management, the use of AI. And actually, we're recording this thousands of miles apart right now because, you're in one location, sort of over in the US. I'm actually in Bulgaria. I was presenting a course about complex crisis management. But the things that are coming up that we're seeing, and so let's set the scene a little bit in terms of what we're seeing broadly across the profession and the field in terms of broad emergency crisis management. What we're seeing, and it's an interesting contrast, at least for me to see anyway, which you've got a growing adoption of AI commercially. As private sector and business environment, if you're monitoring any of that, it's sort of like we're all AI first now, right? All companies are AI first. And there's a growing recognition that there's going to be a fundamental shift in the labor market. If you're in emergency management, you're already feeling the squeeze on the labor market, right? Exactly to your point. And so then why not leverage the use of AI to be an enabler, right? But there's
Mhm.
still a significant, I guess I would say maybe not significant, but I think there is at least a certain amount of distrust using AI, especially when it comes to management and planning and having to make mistakes or whatever the case is, and human in the loop concepts. And then you have this broad recognition that everybody's being AI first in the commercial market. Everything's going to be AI everywhere all the time. And then you have a resource constrained environment where AI does become an enabler, especially in emergency management. And then you have professionally and even culturally in the organizations where there's possibly a reluctance for the adoption of AI. So how do you sort of overcome these challenges? And I think the last one being the most difficult.
Yes. Wow. You're hitting on all the things that we're seeing across the markets. I go back to 1994 and we had the World Wide Web. And then, everybody now says Google this and Google that. And everybody was, oh my gosh, we don't want people using Google and we don't want them. And I look at it in a different, like my set of lenses are, okay, so that was 1994. Fast forward to 2018 when I was with the city of Chicago and I had leadership wanted a common operating picture. And, instantly what the situation, I always said in emergency management, what do you need to know? Size, complexity, and scope to be able to then come up with courses of action to be able to, address, to be managing the consequences. And in 2018, we were dealing with machine learning and we were doing things manually, like literally by hand. Now, all of a sudden you have this tool that basically things that would take a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, maybe a year is now really put into this world where you can do it within minutes, hours, or days. And when I was with the city, one thing I always said was we can either wrap our arms around technology or technology is going to run circles around us. And I share that experience because where we are today is that it's here. It's not going anywhere. If everybody's saying AI first, we should be adopting that. We should be thinking about how AI is a forethought in emergency management. We say we have limited blue sky days across the world right now. We're talking today, Melissa has just impacted the Caribbean, two nations that have been, greatly impacted with Jamaica and Cuba and the other preparations that are happening. And people are truly doing whatever preparations are needed and understanding the size, complexity, and scope of that situation. So we have these complexities that are happening across the world. And the thing is we will never have enough staff. You can never have enough staff to be able to address the needs of the communities that have been impacted by catastrophic events. This is where AI is meeting the crisis management and emergency management world. Blue sky days, we should be leveraging it to be able to enhance our plans, look into continuous improvement, ensuring that we're meeting criteria of whatever is outlined, whether it's FEMA's Comprehensive Planning Guide 101, whether it's the community risk reduction framework. If you were to upload that into a system right now and say, find the similarities and differences and help me, that's used to the US system, then we can do that. And it can be simplified in a way that we can ingest it overall, which is what we should be doing. There's layers of complexity that we should be making simple to be able to articulate it to the broader communities that we serve overall. Emergency management has never been funded, staffed, or resourced appropriately ever. I think about people that talk about what their needs are, and we are always understaffed and we are underfunded. And so now we have a tool that is in our toolbox, but we have to practically leverage it overall. Now, let's talk about hesitancy for a second. I hear it. I hear that people are worried about it. I hear that AI is going to take our jobs. And I still go back to what I heard a couple of years ago as AI was coming out into the field, which is humans are still the levers behind it. I was listening to a podcast the other day where they said, in the end, AI has no feeling. We're learning it and it's learning along. But then there's other ones. Our CEO at EM1, Tyler, he'll say, this is as bad as it's ever going to be. Now, let's think about that for a minute. If this is as bad as it's ever going to be, and we can create efficiencies over time, that's what we need to be doing. So when it comes into hesitancy, the one thing that I always think about is, what do you do day to day? And if you were to just take a moment to just, when I go back to my career, people have always said, let's take a stop check moment for a second. What are we doing? What do we need to solve? This is an emergency management, term that we hear is, what are you trying to solve? After Hurricane Helene, when I responded with FEMA, I heard the term, begin with the end state in mind. What is it that you really want to get to over time? How can we, when Hurricane Helene, what have you always wanted? Because you're going to have a lot of money that's going to be pumped into a community that's been potentially impacted. What is it that's needed for this community to continue to build that community resilience over time? And so I think about with AI, I think the same thing. Begin with the end state in mind. What is it that you're trying to accomplish every single day? Number one. Number two is, where are you working? Are you spending time writing briefs? Are you spending time putting together situation reports for localized incidents for chief elected officials? Are you writing grants? Are you training those plans, exercising those plans so people know who does what, when, and where? What AI can help build those efficiencies are, because we spend a lot of time behind a computer screen. And as emergency
Mhm.
manager, for someone that lives in a community, I'd rather my emergency managers be out there understanding the risks of the community, understanding the resilience factors that can go into them to build community readiness, and not sitting behind a computer punching keys into a keyboard. We need to, that approach of being the writer, in the maturity model should be, we should be really thinking about being those editors over time. Hesitancy is going to be there with something that's new. The
Mhm.
more a person understands how it can support them individually and in the profession, understanding the ingestion process of how AI is going to be applied and then continuously improved, that's going to be where there's going to be a change. Because really, a lot of the time, things are afterthoughts. Who uses plans? What are plans? Everybody always says a plan only meets first contact. They go, oh, the plan that's sitting on the shelf. There's thousands of hours that have been placed into it. We're held to this standard of updating our plans, policies, and procedures on a regular basis. And then we have incidents. And the question is, did we follow the plan? Did we follow the
Mhm.
policy? Did we follow the procedure? And ultimately, what I'm going to see potentially, or what we're going to see, is there accountability that's placed more on emergency managers? And are people willing to take that accountability? We're responsible anyway. We're accountable to the communities we serve. But then how do we continuously improve over time? As you just brought up, there's complexities in every incident across the world. Any incident that takes place today, there's going to be a complexity that we didn't plan for, but we're going to have to problem solve for. And as we do that, we need to be able to understand the situation and come up with those courses of action to respond to and recover from that event to ultimately build that resilience for that community overall.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that there's a lot, and just in terms of hesitancy, I think that there's a lot in terms of, I don't know the best way to phrase it. I wouldn't say fear, but I think so. The way I sort of equate it, and I reserve my right to judge this completely different later on, but the way I equate it now is it's essentially like the difference between email and letters. Email changed how we work. You have the memes out there where it's like, this meeting could have been an email. People just so accustomed to digging into email for hours and hours and hours. We don't send letters, at least very rarely, like official documents maybe, but it's that sort of impact that changes your workflow and the way that you're thinking about how you do your work. It becomes a tool. It's something that is enabling you and making you work more efficiently because your time should be spent in emergency management, focusing on the glue that binds things together in the community and the agencies. And to your point about plans, it's also funny because I've used this comparison before as well. But, one of the other contrasts is people say, well, the power will go out and then there is no AI. Yeah, but you have a plan on the shelf. It doesn't do anything either, right? You can reference it, but more than likely every EOC has power. Then it's sort of like old school whiteboard and paper, right? I mean, that's what we get back to. So how do you build that skill set in today's environment when you're behind the computer with email or documents and Excel sheets, right? That's the contrast. You're still putting a lot of time behind the computer, exactly. And then you're missing those key human skills that you need to be adaptable and work in those austere or different conditions. And so it is this weird contrast that's happening right now. I think it's going to fundamentally shape the way the economy is running, but it's going to fundamentally shape the way that we're doing work. Being an optimist, I hope that it places more emphasis on being able to do the things of what you're talking about, which is actually go out and talk to people instead of having to spend 40 hours writing something or a grant application. And you can actually just say, I need a grant application for this, and it writes it, and then you can move on to something more meaningful and impactful. Those are just my 2 cents and my thoughts right now. I reserve the right to go back and say this was a terrible idea. But for right now, it just seems like that's the place we're at.
The thing is, we're a people first industry. We're always focused on the, whether it's readiness, whether it's building resilience within that community, understanding the community. We are people first. And the more we can understand the situation on a blue sky day, understanding our communities wherever we serve, knowing where the risks are, knowing how we need to reduce those risks and build that resilience, that's going to buy our time. If we had an incident today and it was catastrophic, and AI was being leveraged, which it's being used in incidents across the world today, I would rather have that future planning the next 48, 72, 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, 1 year. I would rather a future planning cell be able to talk track some of that stuff and be coming up with things that we should be planning for instead of dealing with what's right in front of us, which of course it's always life safety, life preservation that's first. But at the same time, what's going to happen is that the response is going to work itself out. And then you have this astronomical long road ahead of recovery. I was just in New Mexico last week and I was hearing the stories of Rodeso, like where, it's like, how do people feel when it rains now, when they've had back-to-back floods over time? How do we make sure that we're thinking of what are the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 8 weeks? And when it's no longer in the news, that community is still impacted. How do we make sure that we're taking care of those community members who aren't thinking the way we think as emergency managers? We think about this every day. We talk about it. We teach about it in terms of disasters. I was talking to Dr. Randy Collins. One thing he and I talked about was like, we as emergency managers deal within this world on a regular basis. It's the community members that we want to make sure that we're taking care of and that we're meeting them where they are. But the only way to do that is to get out from that computer. I think about incidents in terms of future planning where we can actually find that space that we can think and put ideas onto paper. I'll give a prime example. I was talking about the incorporation of AI, what we need to be thinking about in terms of when someone says, hey, I'm AI curious and I want to be AI competent. And what's that road look like? Our CEO goes, write that down. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Between travel, family, calls, when am I going to write this down? And all of a sudden I was walking and I thought, wait a minute, like why I'm walking and I have a clear headspace and an idea of how I'm going to organize my thoughts. And I'm not the first one to, and many people who know me, I have a lot of thoughts and I have to talk them out in order to frame them in a way where it could be understood. And this is where it's nice to have leadership that actually did not come from the emergency management field because I'm having to articulate it in more of a simpler fashion. I took out my phone and I just wrote myself an email and I just started talking. And the first thing I started talking about was begin with the end state in mind. What is it that we want to accomplish? What resources do I need at my fingertips when I'm writing a plan? Who do I need at the table? How does this work? I started throwing all these ideas and just talking into my phone, like writing myself an email. I then went home uploaded it into EM1, which basically was going to only talk to my thoughts because it's a closed system, did it in a way that was understandable. So then I took it to my family and I said to my wife, and I said, hey, does this make sense? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is the power of what we have today. But I think about tomorrow, those plans, where's AI going? Plans should be coming to us. We shouldn't be going to the plans. We spend the whole time, we work through the whole planning process to make sure that everybody knows who does what, when and where, and what their responsibilities are, and deconflict when people say, that's not my job, that's not my role. Like all that planning process is make sure we get through that deconfliction. And then at the same time, making sure that people are trained and they know what their roles and responsibilities are and they own it. That ownership takes place in emergency management. Fast forward, as we're working through all of that, how can we make sure that we're actually simplifying it for people that don't do emergency management every day, that are called into an emergency operations center or coordination center or called to help in a disaster, to where their day-to-day business is very similar to what they do, that they would then turn into on a gray sky day overall. And so it's a fascinating case study. We're getting used to where AI is today. It's literally the topic of every conversation. When I talk to my kids, my one kid says, do you have a kill switch for the bots? I'm like, yeah, it's called a plug. He's like, no, 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 really, are you sure there's a kill switch for the bots? And I keep reminding, I say, hey, humans are still behind this. This goes back to our hesitancy conversation. Humans are still the levers and writing the prompts, and we're still pulling this together. AI today does not have that gut intuition. That's experience. You can definitely take the plans and say, bring some courses of action. Fast forward to where it's going to go. The plans that we've worked on, the policies we've worked on. My vision is that it comes to us. We work on these phones every single day. We have data that's out there coming to us in terms of weather events, in terms of situational awareness of what's happening in the news, breaking news alerts. We are a now society. How do we ingest it to make sure we can understand it so we can come up with courses of action to respond to and recover from it, regardless of the incident, and take away some of those complexities we're seeing over time?
So when you were talking, the visualization that came to my head is, sort of back in I guess maybe it was the 80s or something. You start to see the advent of Lotus Notes and the PC coming out. It essentially put everybody behind the computer. This was the effect on society. With the advent of technology, then we start having Windows 95, Microsoft Office, and everything else. Now everybody's behind the computer all the time. And so then I wondered if a certain aspect here is that this is the opportunity to release ourselves of that obligation, right? Of the constraints that have been put on us, because now we're basically trying to break the burden of having to sit in front of the computer, because maybe there's a tool that can help you with that, whether you're talking on the phone or that you're doing things through AI to just review and edit rather than generate. And I think that's one of those fundamental shifts that we're seeing. I would offer this perspective because I saw this and I'm interested in your thoughts. So just bear with me for a second. I have to read it because I think this was from a company called Every or something. This sort of hits to this point, and I do want to get your perspective on it, but it's called the allocation economy. It says, and I'm reading this directly from this post that I found, the way I think about how AI will affect the economy at large is to move us from knowledge economy to an allocation economy. In a knowledge economy, you are compensated based on what you know. In an allocation economy, you are based on how well you can portion out the resources of intelligence. So you need vision, a taste for ideas, for language, and an ability to effectively communicate what you want in words. You need to know how to plan and estimate timelines, how to break up projects and distribute them among different people skilled at different tasks. You need to know when to step in and what to micromanage to ensure the details are right. All of these skills exist in the knowledge economy, and they are the skills of human managers. Not just managers in business, but anyone who manages humans. Showrunners, directors, and conductors all do the same kind of things. But human managers take up only about 10% of the workforce. And in order for everyone to effectively work with AIs on a day-to-day basis, these are the exact skills that we all need to develop. So in broad strokes, this is how AI might affect creative work. For many creative tasks, we'll move up one level of abstraction from doing everything ourselves to directing what work needs to be done and how. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that you just articulated what an emergency manager does every day. You're saying these words, and I'm thinking to myself, we've done that. When I was at the state of Chicago, The senior emergency management coordinators were always called project managers. I did not like that. I did not like when they were like, oh, but they deal with projects. I'm like, that's great. But do they have the Six Sigma? And do they have this? And do they have that? The answer is no. But they adapted to that and knew who to call, the basics, right? Bring it back down to the basics. Who to call, when and where, who to ask for resources, solving the problem that's right in front of us. And the thing is, what you described is exactly what emergency managers do, but we do it by ourselves. Many emergency management shops are one person shops that basically say, this is all I've got and I'm not getting any more help. And it's hard because we need to be innovative. Resilience has been a big word over the last couple of years across the world. Resilience has a foothold and a stronghold. People have said, how do you measure resilience? How do you measure readiness? I believe that if we were to sit all of us in a room or on a Zoom and talk, we could come up with 30 measures of resilience, 30 measures of readiness, and then put them into AI and say, okay, what's the common theme? And I have a feeling we'd probably come up with the same 3 to 7 themes that we all talk about, but we articulate it differently overall. So I believe if you look at where people are saying AI is going, I can't wait for you to send that article or that post over, because emergency managers, this is what we do every day. So if it's what we do every day, how do we make it a forethought to get more time to build that readiness and resilience within the communities overall? My perspective is challenge accepted for all of us in the emergency management community. We shouldn't be afraid of what this innovation has to offer. If we look across spectrums, everybody's using AI to a degree. The apps that we're using on our phones are using some aspect of AI overall. And when you talk to the education field and you talk to the private sector and you talk to, healthcare field, AI is being leveraged every day. People are like, well, I don't like that. And I'm thinking to myself, there are massive amounts of data that I know I personally can't consume or understand that's out there that AI could simplify in a way that could be articulated to the people that we serve. And we need to be doing that. Unfortunately, we do see that people in less disaster prone areas, or even if they're in disaster prone areas, do they know where to go when an incident happens? Today I'm in Hawaii, and last night I was talking to Dr. Randy Collins. He was telling us that the way the tsunami zones are built out is that you're in a tsunami zone. It tells you where to go if there's a tsunami. When you're leaving a tsunami zone, that's a worst case scenario. I'm here on a trip. I was like, oh, that makes sense. But how do you know that you're in a safe area? He goes, well, that's for worst case scenario. That's not necessarily the case if there's a smaller incident. Does the people that are literally working day to day put food on the table and take care of their family and their friends and home life? Are they thinking about those types of readiness aspects? And what is our job is to make sure that we can articulate in a way to show our readiness, but also at the same time be able to, when the incident happens, do exactly what you just said. I was talking to Rich
Mhm.
Serino, who used to be the deputy administrator for FEMA during the Obama administration. And I was so excited. I said, Rich, it was great to just catch up with him. He's been such a great mentor for me. And I was telling him all the excitement of what we were doing at EM1. And he's like, gosh, Tom, this is the solution emergency managers have needed for a very long time. This is the thing that we need to wrap our arms around on, because this is actually what's going to save us. Every disaster has these layers of complexity that we didn't think about, or we hear from the community members that will never happen. And if we can capture that and know that's the perception of the community, we can then go to this allocation component of how do we articulate risk? How do we articulate what readiness means to the individual community member that lives in a disaster prone area? And then also at the same time, how do we make sure that they have tools to be successful in the event that there's an incident that impacts them, their families, or their communities? AI could help us wrap our arms around it faster so we can focus on those communities that we serve. Because in the end of the day, we're people first. And if we can focus on the people that we serve and simplify it in a way that is understandable, then we're doing our part to make sure people are ready for any type of disaster that might take place.
So there's a lot going on that leads us to the final part of our conversation, which is the future. Sharing some experiences of this week. I'm presenting on complex crisis management, and some of the key themes that we talk about is, of course, cascading effects and the velocity of crisis and how things can get out of hand very quickly, and it's going beyond any plan that you might have. In our work in the international crisis management space, we link that to state stability and how that, when these complex crises happen, then that basically opens up opportunities for adversarial nations to exploit that, to launch cyber attacks and take advantage of government performance. Let's just call it that way. If you're not able to effectively deal with a crisis as a government and you lose confidence in the people, it's exacerbated by adversaries or criminal organizations. Unless you can effectively deal with a civilian crisis and emergency management, you just leave opportunities for people to exploit that. The challenge is that things are getting more and more complex, right? Systems are connected, there's cascading effects, things go very, very quickly. And what we call the velocity of crisis, it moves from power to hospitals to transportation routes to traffic control systems. All of these things just go very, very quickly nowadays. And it's impossible for one person to keep up. There has to be a mechanism to manage knowledge. And this is the biggest problem. We're still operating in silos. We have our legal constraints. This is what we do. I do my thing, you do your thing, and we will do our things together when we have to. Before we started recording, we were talking about the difference between the US and the European perspective. Many of the Europeans are preparing for conflict, which means they are taking some drastic steps: decentralization of government, regional councils, integrated civil military planning, similar to the old civil defense days, really making decisions. And it comes down to your point about even at an ICP or an EOC, how do you actually get the knowledge and information and process it when it's coming at such a speed and such a velocity that you can't effectively manage all of it by yourself? Maybe you're in a small planning team or a small intelligence unit, and it can be overwhelming because you're also not an expert in everything, right? Energy distribution networks and food and water security, you need experts, right? Smaller communities don't have these people. All of these things are coming very fast at us. And that's where I think we may need to be a little bit more forward leaning, because it's ultimately just going to get more and more complex very quickly in the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case is. And it's something that I think we just have to really keep in mind, because to me, it's not just about the tool. It's more about how you can effectively retain and process knowledge into an actual piece of information or intelligence that you can use to make a decision. Because you still have, as you said, a human in the loop, so to speak. You can understand if that's good information or not. We have a possible vulnerability with a railroad or something, and you don't have railroads in your community. You know that. And you have tools like yours, which are tailored to your environment anyway. I think the future is getting into extremely complex information overload, because it's already bad now. It'll just be worse in the future. And then into the space of where, again, under-resourced and resource constraints and needing to be able to process information much more quickly in order to make decisions that save people's lives. But these are the things that we're talking about in the European sphere, because it's like there's things rapidly changing, drone incursions, things that we don't even think about, rapid escalations and spikes in national security incidents. But still, it's a significant spike up to be able to have a response to a drone targeting an energy sort of power plant. But then how do you come back to civilian control of that? And this whole dynamic of rapid up and downs between a normal crisis, which continues every day anyway, despite whatever's happening in the national security space, you still have floods and fires and everything else. And these rapid spikes and being able to be on a crisis all the time and never having time to recover. And that will lead to one of your previous points when we started the conversation, is exhaustion, right?
Yes.
And so when you get information, all of it all together, all at once, I think somebody made a movie about that, but it's like with that title, but you end up in the same place. You cannot physically process, mentally process, and psychologically process all the stuff that's happening. And the constant stress of like rapid escalation and incursion and probing attacks and infrastructure damage and cyber attacks, plus a wildfire season, plus the floods that happen after that, direction that we're going in.
It is. What does the future hold? The planning assumption should be that we know today we have complexities and disasters to begin with. The planning assumption for any disaster, regardless of what it is that there's going to be adversaries that are going to be impacting us. Do we know the size, complexity, and scope of it? No, we don't overall. But then at the same time as you're like talking about it, the misinformation, disinformation, like we didn't even touch on that. How do we trust the information that's coming at us to make a decision? And sticking with that decision, whether it's the right or wrong decision, we have to go back to our fundamental principles of what are we solving? What are we here for? Which is the communities that are served, number one. But at the same time, where the future is going is that I don't believe with the layers of complexities and this constant state of response that we're in, that we're ever going to be able to get in front of it. But I do believe that with technological advances of where they are today, that we can roll alongside it, that we can anticipate what these challenges are that we're going to face, that we watch this evolving threat environment that's happening, which we've known we've talked about the evolving threat environment for years. We know it's there, but what are we doing about it? I had the great honor when I was at FEMA to actually do some international programs and engage with the European Union, engage with our partners across a different set of world. And as we're hearing about conflict of what the preparations are, I was able to try and synthesize it in my head. This is what readiness looks like. This is what we need to be talking to and being ultimately prepared in general. Technology is going to continue to advance. I've watched it my entire life. I grew up in a time where internet did not exist and we still had the plain old telephone system. Now we're in a technological environment where you're in Bulgaria and I'm in Hawaii. So we're worlds apart, but we're able to connect. And we are in a now environment. So we have to be able to synthesize this. I believe it's going to help us. I believe that it's going to be able to help us better understand the situation and bore through what, as you just alluded to, the silos of excellence that we have. We need the subject matter experts that understand how to put the power system back online, to get the water systems, to have those basic needs. And we need everybody in the room, but we also are dealing with the other complexities of an incident. We are problem solvers. We are the ones called to prepare on a blue and a gray sky day. We as emergency managers are supposed to know who does what, who the subject matter experts are. If we don't know who the subject matter experts are, we have the responsibility is then find them. I was with the city of Chicago. It was figure it out. The 3 words that I was always told, figure it out. That problem solving, when we have space to think, will allow us to do what's best for the communities we serve. In the end, it's about doubling down on basically, I believe, which is the most important mission, which is people. And if we're able to do that, then we're able to actually build up that resilience and readiness to combat whatever is in front of us. We have to be prepared for it. We have to open our arms to it. We shouldn't be scared of it. We should have open dialogue of what we're hesitant about. And then also at the same time as we're having the open dialogue, we should be able to take away the nervousness that's associated with it, the hesitancy that's associated with it, and be able to show how technology, how AI will be a benefit overall to be able to allow us to do what we're called to do every single day.
Well, on that note, Tom, thanks a lot for joining us on the podcast. Really interesting discussion. Maybe we'll do a part 2. Basically, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate the conversation. It's great to hear from you and see some of the things you're doing. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way is to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can look me up at Tom Sivak on LinkedIn or send me an email, tom@em1.com. Very simple.
All right, great. All right, thanks a lot, Tom. And thanks everybody for listening to the Crisis Lab podcast. Tune in next time and we'll continue our discussions around complex crisis and what we can do about it every day. All right, see you next time.
Thanks, Kyle.